Until, in a gesture of desperation and hope, Eliza decided to look for the only person left with any blood ties, the mother of the man who abandoned her. His name was Donna Odette, a firm woman known in the neighborhood for her strictness. She had been sewing for herself since she was 14, raised 2 children alone, lost her husband to cancer, and had never cried in public since his funeral. A tough woman, short on words, and a closed heart. Elisa took a deep breath in front of the old door, with the baby in her arms and her soul broken. A shopping cart with 2 bags was all that was left of her life. She didn't want charity. I wasn't there for revenge, not even for justice. I was there for dignity, for a roof over my head, for a little humanity. When Donna Odette opened the door, there was a second of silence between them, a heavy second. A second in which perhaps fate was testing that woman's compassion. But what came next? It was a cold rejection. You are not my family, not mine. It was. You're on your own. Eliza listened silently. Not a tear, not a scream, not a single plea for mercy. She just looked at her sleeping son in her arms and felt a lump tighten in his throat. She turned around, but before we leave, he left a letter, a plain envelope. No name, no address, no requirements. Just a folded piece of paper with what her heart couldn't say out loud. At that moment, Donna Odette didn't pay attention looking. He threw it on the table. That was just another burden she didn't want to carry. What she didn't know, it's just that those words, silent and invisible at that moment, would transform everything she believed in, and maybe, just maybe, what she rejected that cold night. It was the last chance to remedy a past that she herself tried to hide for so many years. Cut to the image of the forgotten letter on the table. The camera focuses on the envelope, while the music rises in slight tension. What Eliza wrote would change the course of everything. And it's in the next chapter that everything starts to fall apart. Because no one expects the truth to come from someone who has been rejected. The door opened slowly, a creaking sound, a cold coming from inside. Donna Odette appeared with narrowed eyes, arms crossed, a look that said more than any words: distrust, judgment, rejection. Elisa could barely smile. I was tired. 3 nights without proper sleep, the son with a fear pounding in his chest. Hi, I'm Eliza. He began hesitantly, holding the sleeping baby tightly. Donna Odette didn't even respond. He let her in reluctantly, a cold gesture. An absence of welcome that spoke volumes. Elisa tried to sit up, but there was no invitation. She remained standing as if she were about to be judged. The house was spotless. The antique furniture was covered in white slipcovers. Everything was in order, except for the owner's heart. So like a sentence said never had to consider the consequences, came the sentence that cut Eliza inside. You are not part of this family. Elisa stood still. My son made a mistake, yes, but it's his mistake. Don't ask me to pay for it. That's not my problem. Time seemed to stop. The clock on the wall ticked. The baby moved gently in his mother's lap, oblivious to the tension of the moment. Elisa felt her heart tighten, but she didn't cry, didn't argue. He didn't fall to his knees, as many would have done. There was something in his silence that screamed louder than any answer. She just looked at Donna Odette one last time. He looked as if to say, you could have been the beacon of hope in this storm, but you chose to be another stone in the road. Then he turned carefully. with dignity. But before I walked through the door back into the cold street, she did something unexpected. She took a small beige envelope out of her bag. He left it on the kitchen table next to a cup of coffee that he didn't even touch. Without saying anything, he just left. The door closed behind her with a dull thud. Donna Odette didn't even accompany her to the gate. She stood there, looking at the envelope with disdain. Another cheap drama, he thought. Another attempt to manipulate my guilt. But she didn't know, I had no idea, that that envelope contained something that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Because in that letter, Eliza didn't ask for anything. He did not make pleas, nor did he play the victim. What she did, waste the truth that Donna Odette had worked hard for decades to bury. Those words, written with dried tears and trembling hands, would burn like live coals. It wasn't a request, it was a mirror where Donna Odette would see the reflection of her own past, of the decisions he made, of the people he pushed away, of the woman she became, and above all, of the mother she herself once rejected. The image of the letter resting on the table dominates the screen, zooms in slightly. The camera, the music builds in subtle tension, because the pain of rejection can pass. But the pain of the ignored truth, this one lasts forever. And in the next few minutes, this truth will be read aloud. And what will it reveal? Will change everything. 3 days passed. The house remained clean, organized, but something was different. One strange silence seemed to hover through the rooms, as if echoing an absence not previously perceived. The envelope was still there, perhaps avoided, forgotten. But that afternoon, as she washed a mug alone, Donna Odette stopped. He looked at the table. The envelope was the same, intact, almost as if he was waiting for her. Drying her hands on her apron, she approached. He touched the paper slowly. She felt a shiver, as if something inside her already knew. That letter was not just anything. He sat down. He opened it carefully, and he began to read. The first sentence made her hold her breath. Your son swore eternal love. He ran away at the first ultrasound. Her hand trembled. The eyes, still dry, continued reading. I didn't come here for myself. I came for him, because my son has the right to know where he came from. To feel that, even if his father denied him, he still has a story. I didn't want money. I didn't want a room or food or pity. I just wanted him to have a grandmother, a role model, a hug that said, you belong somewhere. But now I understand the coldness he has. Pause in reading. He inherited Donna from Odette's eyes well up with tears for the first time in years. She tries to continue, but the hand covers the mouth. A sob escapes. She is alone. For the first time, truly alone. Because there in front of her was not just a letter. There was a mirror of one's own life. Every sentence on that simple sheet was a real punch, dismantling the walls she spent years building. You didn't reject me. You rejected your own blood. You rejected the chance to start over. I feel for you, because I know that deep down, only those who have been hurt too much act like this. But know this, I forgive, not for you, but for me, because carrying resentment would be a burden my son doesn't deserve to inherit. Goodbye. And thank you for showing me who you really are. Now I know I don't need to look any further. The final words burned like salt in an open wound. Donna Odette Leo, relay. And for the first time in decades, words themselves, not but by the opened wide. Because deep down she knew, she always knew, he knew he raised his children coldly. That Eliza abandoned her own son was no surprise. It was a repeat. I knew I had become so hardened that I no longer knew how to love. And now it was too late. Quick flashbacks appear on the screen. Audit's childhood, being rejected by her own mother, her husband's funeral, her son running away from home, her sewing in silence. Cycle was there, of course, firm, visible, and she had repeated it in an attempt to protect themselves from the world. Odette became part of the pain she once hated so much. And now, sitting at the table with the letter crumpled between her fingers, all that remained was the echo of a choice she could no longer undo. The music reaches its peak, then begins to fade. Audit's gaze is lost. The camera slowly pulls away, because sometimes the biggest punishment isn't being rejected, but discovering that you were the one who rejected the very thing you needed most. Fade out, image darkens. Subtle, melancholic music, but there was still something Donna Odette could do. If it wasn't too late. Months passed, the seasons changed. Autumn brought dry leaves that accumulated on the sidewalk. Winter came without warning, and in Donna Odette's house, everything remained the same. The curtains remained closed. The kettle whistled every afternoon, even if no one else was drinking tea. The clock on the wall still ticked away with the same merciless ticking. But for Odette, time seemed to stand still. From that day on, she started looking for Eliza, went to shelters. He knocked on church doors. He went into hospitals and even walked through fairs with a photo of his grandson in his pocket. Always with the same question stuck on my lips. Have you seen this woman? She's carrying a small baby, but nobody knew. Nobody recognized it. Lisa had disappeared, as if the pain she left had taken everything she had left with her. But the letter remained. Today she is framed, hanging on the living room wall, just above the sofa where Odette spends her afternoons in silence. She reads it every day, every sentence, as if it were a painful prayer, not because she expects to be forgiven, but why need to remember? Remember that sometimes it is not time that heals, but the sincere repentance. And there are mistakes that time cannot erase. There are doors that, when closed, open again. Never. Today, Donna Odette lives surrounded by silence. It's not the usual silence of someone who lives alone. It's the kind of silence that teachered with voices that never existed. The grandson's laughter running through the yard, the sound of a child saying "Grandma," Elisa's voice calling from the kitchen. Sounds that don't exist, but memory insists on creating. And deep down, maybe she still hopes, perhaps, every time the doorbell rings at the house across the street, every time you hear outside, with every shadow that passes through the gate, she gets up with a glimmer of hope. What if it's her? What if she came back? But it isn't. It never is. And yet, every night before she goes to sleep, she looks over the letter one more time and whispers in a whisper, "Forgive me, my daughter." Because the hardest truth of this story, it's not rejection. It's not abandonment. It is the awareness that the family you reject today, it may be the only piece of love that was trying to offer you. And maybe, just maybe, Donna Odette still hopes one day to hear the doorbell ring. And you? Have you ever been in a situation where pride spoke louder than your heart? Or do you know someone who missed a chance because they were afraid to love again? Share with us here in the comments. Your story can inspire, heal, or even transform someone today. If this story touched your heart, leave your like. Subscribe to the channel to follow other stories like this. Activate the bell, because sometimes it's in a video like this that we find a piece of our own history. And you? Have you ever experienced something similar? Have you ever been rejected when you most needed acceptance? Share your story here in the comments. She might be the hug someone needs today. And if this story touched you, like the video, subscribe to the channel, and activate the bell. Because stories like this deserve to be heard. She didn't scream, didn't beg. It wasn't even explained. She just looked into the eyes of the people she once thought she could call family and left. At the door, the cold wind mixed with the cutting silence. And as her back disappeared into the wet street, what remained was not immediate regret, but something worse, contempt. The kind of contempt that echoes inside the house for days, weeks, years, until one day you realize that the void that remains is greater than any pride you tried to protect. But she didn't leave empty-handed. She left something on the table, a simple folded piece of paper, a letter, hidden among untouched dishes and unspoken words. At that moment, no one paid any attention. After all, what could a rejected single mother have to say? But when they finally opened, it was too late. Those words, handwritten with pain, dignity, and misunderstood love, transformed what was just another unwanted visit in a legacy that no one could ever erase again. She was received coldly, that no one could ever fill. Single mother is rejected by her mother-in-law, but leaves a letter that changes everything.